Most anglers look at their setup and think the only way to fish better is to spend $200 or $300 on a new rod or a new reel. And I understand why that thought happens, because the tackle shop makes it easy to believe that. You walk in, you see that beautiful rod hanging on the wall, the reel sitting in the glass case, and your brain tells you that whatever is going wrong on the water would instantly be fixed if you just owned that. But here is the thing most people do not stop to consider. The difference between a frustrating fishing trip and a productive one often comes down to 4 or 5 items that cost less than $20 combined. Not a new rod, not a high-end reel, just small, overlooked upgrades that change how your bait moves, how your knot holds, how your line performs, and how quickly you can locate the right presentation when the fish are being picky. Hit subscribe before we get into it. If you want honest gear advice without the sales pitch, this channel is where you want to be. I'm Jerry Davis, and I've spent enough time around tackle shops, fishing setups, and gear comparisons to know that most anglers are not losing fish because their rod costs $50 instead of $200. They are losing fish because of small details that nobody bothered to explain when they started fishing. Today, I am going to walk you through the cheapest upgrades that consistently make the biggest practical difference on the water. Not expensive, not flashy, just the stuff that actually works and that you can buy, fix, or change without spending a lot of money. By the end of this, you will know exactly what to look at first when your fishing starts to feel off, and you will have a clear list of inexpensive changes that can immediately improve how your gear performs. Let's start with the one upgrade that probably has the single highest return on investment of anything I am going to mention today, and that is fresh line. This sounds too simple to be worth discussing, but stick with me for a second, because line failure is responsible for more lost fish, more missed bites, and more frustration than almost anything else on a typical fishing setup. Old monofilament, or old fluorocarbon, develops memory. It coils, it twists, it comes off the spool in tight little loops that affect how your bait falls and how naturally it moves through the water. Old braid does not suffer from memory the same way, but it fades, weakens at the knot, and starts showing wear that you may not notice until a fish pulls against it hard. The coating on old fluorocarbon breaks down, the line becomes more visible, and knot strength drops well below what the line was rated for when it was new. A full spool of quality monofilament in the 12-pound range costs around $6 or $7 at most retailers. A good 100-yard spool of fluorocarbon in the 10 or 12-pound range runs maybe $10 to $15. This is not a significant investment, but anglers routinely leave the same line on their reels for a full season, sometimes 2, and then wonder why their presentations do not look right or why they keep breaking off on fish that were not even particularly large. If you take nothing else from this video, go look at the line on your reels. If you cannot remember the last time you respooled, just respool it. This is the fastest and cheapest thing you can do to make your entire setup perform better from the first cast. Now, let me talk about hooks, because this drives me nuts. People buy perfectly good lures and then fish them on hooks that have been dulled, bent, or corroded from previous trips. A dull hook does not mean the hook looks broken or rusted all the way through. It means the point has lost its sharpness to the degree that it skips across a hard-mouthed base instead of penetrating cleanly. You can check your hook point by dragging it lightly across your thumbnail. If it grabs and catches, it is sharp. If it slides without catching, it has lost enough edge that you are already giving fish a way to throw it. The fix here is either a hook file or a complete hook replacement, and neither costs much. A hook sharpening file runs about $3 and can restore a hook point in about 30 seconds of light work. Replacing treble hooks on a crankbait with a set of higher quality aftermarket trebles costs maybe $3 to $4 per set and can genuinely improve hookup rates. Anglers consistently report better hook sets after switching from the stock hardware on cheaper lures to a sharper, heavier gauge replacement hook. If you pick up a discount bin crankbait or a store brand jerkbait, the savings often come from the hooks. The blank may be fine. The action may be acceptable. But the hooks are usually where manufacturers cut costs when they are trying to bring the retail price down. Swapping those out for a name brand replacement hook is often the smartest $5 investment you can make on a lure. Here is what most anglers overlook when it comes to lure hardware in general. The split rings connecting your hooks to your lure body are also part of this equation. Thin, cheap split rings open under pressure from a large fish. The hook stays in the fish. The lure comes back without it. Replacing cheap split rings with a slightly heavier gauge takes maybe 5 minutes per lure and removes a common failure point from the system. Split rings come in packs of 50 or 100 for a couple of dollars. There is no reason to leave weak hardware on a lure you paid good money for. Let us move to fluorocarbon leader material, because this is an upgrade that a lot of freshwater anglers treat as unnecessary, and a lot of saltwater anglers treat as expensive. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Running straight fluorocarbon from reel to bait on a spinning setup in lighter line weights gets awkward because lighter fluoro tends to be stiffer than monofilament of the same diameter, and it can cause handling and casting issues on a spinning reel. But using fluorocarbon specifically as a leader, tied to a braid main line with a knot like the FG or the Alberto, gives you the low visibility and abrasion resistance of fluorocarbon, right where it matters most, without requiring you to fill an entire spool with expensive line. A 50-yard spool of 12-pound fluorocarbon runs around $12 to $15. That spool will cut you a substantial number of liters. You are not running it from spool to bait. You are using maybe 4 to 6 feet of it as the terminal section between your knot and your lure. In clear water or around light-colored rock and shell, that low visibility leader can make a genuine difference in how pressured fish respond to the bait. Anglers who switch from straight mono to a braid to fluorocarbon leader setup frequently report more confidence fishing around visible structure, and it is one of those upgrades that does not require any new rod or reel to implement. You just change the way you rig. Now, this one costs nothing, $0, but it might be the most underutilized upgrade on this entire list, and that is reel cleaning and lubrication. Most anglers do not clean their reels regularly. They fish them hard, maybe rinse them off, and put them away. Over time, even a decent reel starts running rough because old grease breaks down, debris works into the body, and moisture slowly affects the internal components. A reel that feels rough or gritty is not necessarily worn out. It may just need to be cleaned. Reel oil for the bearings and reel grease for the gears are not expensive. A small tube of reel grease and a dropper of reel oil together cost maybe $8 to $10 and will last through multiple cleanings across multiple reels. For a spinning reel, removing the side cover, cleaning the gears with a rag, applying fresh grease to the gear surfaces, and putting a drop of oil on each bearing can bring a sluggish reel back to feeling considerably smoother. This matters because a smooth-running reel is easier to control on a light line presentation, reduces fatigue during a long day of repeated casting, and is far less likely to fail at a critical moment than a neglected one. Reel maintenance is the upgrade that extends the life of whatever reel you already own, whether it cost $40 or $400. While we are on the subject of terminal tackle, let me talk about knots for a minute. Not a product you buy, but a skill investment that costs nothing and makes a measurable difference in how your setup holds up under pressure. A poorly tied Palomar knot will fail at a significantly lower force than a properly tied one. The same applies to the improved clinch, the uni knot, and the loop knot. The knot you tie is the weakest point in the entire system if it is not tied correctly, and no upgrade to your line or your hooks will protect you from a knot that cuts through itself under load. If you have been tying the same basic knot since you started fishing and have never looked at whether you are doing it correctly, spend 15 minutes watching a few knot tutorials and testing your knots before you go out. Tie them to a solid object and pull hard. See where they fail. Learn to keep your wraps neat. Wet the knot before pulling it tight, and avoid letting the coils stack unevenly. This is free, and it directly reduces how often a big fish runs away from you, simply because the terminal connection was not built well enough to hold it. Let us talk tackle organization, because this connects directly to fishing efficiency in a way people do not always frame as a gear upgrade, but it genuinely functions like one. Think about the last time you spent 5 minutes digging through an unorganized tackle bag, looking for a specific hook size or the right swivel while the fish were actively feeding around structure. That time costs you fish. Getting your terminal tackle into a small, organized plastic box with labeled compartments is a cheap upgrade that keeps hooks, weights, swivels, snap links, and small soft plastics accessible in seconds instead of minutes. Clear lid utility boxes from most hardware and sporting goods stores run $1 to $3 each. A few of those, properly organized, change how quickly you adapt when conditions call for a different rig or a different hook size. You are not adding new gear. You are simply making the gear you already have accessible when it matters. Anglers who fish with a disorganized bag consistently spend more time rigging and less time fishing than anglers who can locate exactly what they need immediately. That is not an exaggeration. It is just math. Moving on, let us talk about split shot weights and tungsten versus lead. Most anglers who use split shot and basic finesse weights are running lead, which is fine and functional. But tungsten weights of the same size are smaller and denser, which means they transmit bottom feel and contact more clearly to the rod tip. A small tungsten drop shot weight, or a finesse-sized tungsten ball weight, is a noticeable upgrade when you are trying to feel the difference between gravel, sand, rock, or shell on the bottom. The information that comes back through the line is sharper. It helps you understand the bottom composition faster and keep your bait in contact with the structure where fish are likely holding. Tungsten costs more per piece than lead, but in smaller finesse sizes, the price difference is not dramatic, and you are using a smaller number of weights during any given trip. A pack of 8 to 10 small tungsten weights in the quarter-ounce range runs around $6 to $8. That is a real upgrade in sensitivity for a modest price. And for drop shot or finesse-style bottom fishing, the difference in bottom contact information is worth paying for. Now, this does not mean you need to switch every weight you own to tungsten. Larger punch weights and heavy flipping weights in lead are still perfectly functional and significantly cheaper. But in lighter finesse applications, where sensitivity and compact profile matter, tungsten is the upgrade that many experienced anglers point to as genuinely worth the price difference. Here is a quick one that often gets ignored at the tackle shop. Swivel quality. Not every application needs a swivel. Plenty of fishing setups work better without one. But when you are running a rig that needs a swivel to function correctly, running a cheap, low-grade swivel is asking for a failure point. Cheap barrel swivels do not always rotate freely under load. They spin at rest, but bind when a fish is pulling against them, which means the swivel is not actually doing its job, and line twist still accumulates. A name brand rolling swivel or ball bearing swivel in the appropriate size rating rotates smoothly under pressure. Packs of quality swivels are not expensive. A 10-pack of solid barrel swivels from a reliable brand runs $2 to $3. The quality difference in how smoothly they rotate under actual fishing load is real and measurable, and it directly affects how clean your line stays over the course of a trip. One more upgrade worth mentioning before we wrap this up, and that is rod tip repair. If you fish often enough, you will eventually have a rod tip section that develops a chipped guide, a bent guide insert, or a damaged tip. A damaged guide does not just look bad. The nick or chip in the insert cuts through your line gradually, weakens the knot end, and eventually contributes to a breakoff. Rod tip replacement kits and replacement guide inserts are available at most tackle shops and online for very low prices. A complete rod tip kit runs around $4 to $5. Learning to replace a damaged tip or swap out a cracked guide insert takes maybe 20 minutes the first time you do it, and considerably less after that. This saves you from throwing away a functional rod because of a single damaged component, and it protects your line from the ongoing damage that a chipped guide creates on every cast. Think about what we have covered today: fresh line, sharp hooks, better hook and split ring hardware on your lures, a fluorocarbon leader, clean and lubricated reels, properly tied knots, organized terminal tackle, tungsten for finesse applications, quality swivels, rod maintenance. Not a single one of these requires spending a significant amount of money. Most of them together would cost less than $25, and several of them cost nothing at all beyond a small amount of time. But collectively, they address the most common reasons fishing trips produce poor results when the water conditions were actually in your favor. Tell me in the comments which one of these is something you already do regularly and which one you have been putting off, because I guarantee there is at least one on this list sitting in somebody's tackle setup right now that is costing them fish on every trip. Good fishing does not come from buying the most expensive gear on the rack. It comes from keeping the gear you own in good condition, understanding the details that actually affect performance, and making smart, small decisions instead of expensive, large ones. The angler who fishes with fresh line, sharp hooks, clean reels, and organized tackle will consistently outfish someone who owns twice the gear but has not paid attention to any of those fundamentals. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Jerry Davis, and I'll catch you in the next one.